going up a little bit. Okay, I will start. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining this workshop today. You're in the UFCW Canada workshop centering worker voices in the workplace and in the community justice through a labor perspective. My name is Emmanuel Lopez Bastos and my pronouns are she, her. Feel free to state your pronouns by clicking on the top 3 buttons, top of your video box, and click on the rename function to add that beside your name if you so choose. Today, we have a wonderful set of speakers who will touch on the diverse actions that we as a union and a worker collective are taking towards social justice. We're going to do a deep dive on migrant rights, Indigenous rights, and LGBTQ solidarity and action by listening from speakers whose activism and passion leads work in our union to dismantle hate and call allies into conversations about equity. But first, I want to situate my comments from the traditional territory where I join you today, which is Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, home since time immemorial to the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, and many other First Peoples. We want to acknowledge the traditional territory from which you're joining also. As trade unionists, we recognize and embrace our collective responsibility to challenge systems of oppression which continue to hold Indigenous people back from accessing equality. We know, we acknowledge that because of colonization, every system, including the trade union movement, has at different points in history and certainly over the last 100 years been complicit to governmental policy, which at every level has sought to annihilate Indigenous persons. I know that's a strong term, but when we think about how annihilation has shown up in the workforce, it might look today more like limited to no access to the work or economic well-being, little to no access to healthcare or education, etc. If we start there, then we're not so far off from understanding that same system that separated Indigenous children from their parents and continue to harm Indigenous peoples today. Today, we intentionally work towards truth-telling and upholding, undoing the harms of assimilation and racism in workplaces. UFCW is commonly known as the Food Workers Union. We recognize that Indigenous people are the first and rightful landholders and the first to embrace the sustainable relationship to the food system that we contribute to and benefit from today. So we affirm that worker justice is synonymous and has to be with racial justice, and that can only be achieved by holding solidarity with Indigenous justice. So for those in this workshop who maybe aren't familiar with the UFCW, United Food and Commercial Workers Union, I'll do a brief introduction to start, and then we'll move on to the presenters. We're an international union. We represent 1.3 million members across the US and Canada. We have affiliations to the AFL-CIO and in Canada to the Canadian Labour Congress, but we're also a private sector union. Nationally, we represent 250,000 union members employed in about 26 diverse sectors of the economy. And since this pandemic, it is UFCW members who have been called frontline workers, who have received $2 wage premium in the retail sector since the beginning of the pandemic, who saw it clawed back by employers. It's the workers whose recommendations led to worker protections in meat processing plants, in the grocery stores, or your local pharmacies when we got sick. But the pandemic has also taught us to pivot, hasn't it? UFCW members have taken on that fight for racial justice by speaking out against anti-Black racism, substandard disability supports, and the need for paid sick days, and the need for mental health supports, and so on. So that's a little bit about us and about our union. For the next hour, we're gonna go on a journey, which will include a discussion on food. Who grows it? Who sows it? Who sells it? And the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on workers who sit at that critical intersection between precarious labor and union protections. Food is the one staple that we know that if we go without it, we would have had a very difficult time as human beings getting through this pandemic. So to start off, let me ask you something. What's the first thing that pops into your mind if I say the word union? Now I ask you that because when we talk union, oftentimes people refer to union dues, better wages, even sometimes work insurance. However, we don't often go to that place that place where we think self, as in I'm the union. And if I tag my coworker at work, we're the union together. And if we talk about union issues that matter to us in our workplace or in our society, and we can get those into the collective bargaining agreement, then we can secure protections to keep us safe. And so that's one of the messages that we hope to relay to this wonderful group of participants with us today. Simply to say that unions have never mattered more, have never been more important than they are today. Workers need each other. Struggles need each other, and worker power can only be achieved if we do it through together. The collective bargaining process is effective when it addresses LGBTQ rights, gender affirming language, as you'll hear from Jackie Graticola today, when it addresses recall rights, as you'll hear from Santiago Escobar talking about migrant worker rights, on Indigenous rights or time off for Indigenous days of observances, as you'll hear from Elder Flett and Angela Fiddler. Did you know that the Loblaw CEO, the Weston family, is among the 5 top richest families in the country? Despite this, in Ontario specifically, we're at arbitration currently fighting for language that's already defined in the collective bargaining agreement for Loblaw workers throughout this province, which entails paid time off for federally recognized holidays. The National Day for Truth and Reconciliation has come and gone, and the employer has failed to comply. We know this is wrong, and we have the power to fight it because we have the collective bargaining process. Unions educate and increase awareness of equity issues in society. And who better to lead that than union members and frontline workers who are leaders in their own communities? Our union works diligently to support Indigenous communities, and some of these efforts include providing adequate training and developing educational materials to raise awareness within our membership. We know real changes require support above and beyond the shop floor. Our Indigenous Sub-Committee guides UFCW's work, and the objectives include building labor movement relationship with Indigenous people and communities, strengthening Indigenous representation, supporting calls to action, supporting calls for justice. Lastly, the last segment of this workshop is a connection to the historic report that we just did on LGBTQ worker rights. We released it last October in 2020. Shout out to Michelle Kessler, who's our international chair of UFCW Outreach and has joined us today for this presentation. We call this report historic because we know that there's no other union that's an undertaking of this kind, which has surveyed 1,000 UFCW members binationally across the US and Canada, specifically on LGBTQ worker experiences. So from this report, we know that 83% of workers surveyed have family members who identify as LGBTQ, but we also know that only 49% of LGBTQ workers in UFCW workplaces are out. So we know that discrimination is rampant in all sectors, in workplace culture, but also in public interactions with customers. While you'll hear more about this from Jackie's presentation, what we hope to share with you are our own experiences as workers or as activists on the impacts that we've had in creating worker-centered safe spaces within our union and the communities that we serve, where workers can address, denounce, resist workplace violence, discrimination, and harassment, and advocate for systemic changes with union support. So the agenda is this. We're going to present a short video. You saw Santiago testing the system, a short video on migrant worker rights, followed by a presentation by Santiago Escobar on migrant worker rights in Canada. Then you'll hear a presentation on Indigenous rights by Angela Fiddler, followed by a perspective, an Indigenous perspective from our UFCW Canada elder, Eric Flett. And lastly, you'll hear a presentation on the LGBTQ report by Jackie Graticola from UFCW 1006A. There will be some opportunities to ask questions along the way. We'll see what time has in store for us. But in the meantime, I will stop talking, and thank you very much again for joining us. And thank you, OCASI, for making this opportunity available to us at this wonderful, engaging conference. So take it away, Santiago Escobar.
Legal Assistance of Windsor.
Mi nombre es Shelley y trabajo en una agencia comunitaria que se llama Asistencia Legal de Windsor.
And then hear people's story and help them to decide if they have an option, whether it's to remain in Canada or whether it's to meet somebody like the UFCW to help with an open work permit, but to think together what is the best option to move forward.
So the open work permit is a recent program by the federal government, and it really provides workers who are experiencing abuse, harassment, intimidation in their workplace the opportunity to get an open work permit, find decent employment that we all want, and resettle or restabilize their lives. So we're really happy and pleased to partner with the UFCW, who's really taken, I think, a leadership role in meeting with migrant workers, hearing about their experiences, meeting with the federal government as well about this new program, and advocating for the important changes that have come.
También, si es que usted en su trabajo le toparon, le golpearon, le empujaron, le cachetearon, eso es abuso físico. Hay un programa actualmente que es una protección para trabajadores migrantes que vienen a trabajar en Canadá. Esta protección empezó desde el 4 de junio y trabajadores como ustedes que estén en condiciones de abuso física, psicológica, financiera o sexual pueden aplicar para esta protección para que salgan de esa condición de abuso y puedan cambiarse a otro empleador.
The woman that we're going to meet experienced a lot of abuse, harassment, and intimidation to the point where she experienced a lot of lack of sleep. She was having nightmares. She had constant anxiety and depression. And you know, I'm really, really pleased that the UFCW was so successful in getting her open work permit.
Entonces, ¿qué le parece ahora ya tener este permiso de trabajo abierto?
No, pues muy feliz, le doy gracias al sindicato UFCW, de lo cual han hecho un gran milagro, incluyendo todo el equipo. Entonces yo no me lo esperaba. Estoy muy, muy agradecida, muy contenta y estoy muy nerviosa todavía. Todavía no lo creo, pero fue algo bien maravilloso. Entonces yo les comento a los compañeros que si están pasando algún abuso de lo que yo pasé, que se acerquen aquí con el sindicato, que pues se hace realidad un sueño. Entonces pues tenemos posibilidades de salir adelante.
Muy bien.
Muchas, muchas, muchas gracias a todo el equipo.
Me alegro que usted esté bien. Can you see me? Thank you so much. 1 second. I have some issues with this. Thank you so much for having me here and giving me the opportunity to share the work that UFCW does to support migrant workers across Canada. My name is Santiago Escobar. I'm a national representative, a union organizer, a labor advocate with UFCW and the Agricultural Workers Alliance, which is UFCW's agricultural banner to support non-unionized local and migrant agricultural workers. My pronouns are he, him. I'm going to talk about the many hardships that migrant workers face in Canada and two particular core problems that we have identified that temporary foreign workers, the number one is that temporary foreign workers are tied to one employer, meaning they cannot change employers. They have closed work permits. They don't have labor mobility, like any other Canadian worker. If these workers are experiencing abuses, it's almost impossible to change employer, as this would require that the temporary foreign worker finds a new employer who must have labor market impact assessment. So it's complicated. which is an authorization for employers to hire foreign workers. This in practice doesn't happen as employers don't want to share their employees, nor assist a worker who is complaining against the employer. This is why UFCW has been advocating for the last 30 years so migrant workers can get access to open work permits or at least sectorial work permits so they can move within a sector such as agriculture without having to get a new work permit. This would certainly help these workers to address the power imbalance. Local agricultural workers are far too often excluded from their labor rights. So migrant agricultural workers are more vulnerable than the general Canadian workforce, as their legal rights and entitlements are fewer. As a result, Canada's migrant agricultural workers work in general across Canada in conditions where exploitation and abuse are common, unfortunately. And secondly, the exclusion from collective bargaining rights of local and migrant agricultural workers. To give an example, in Ontario, where about 40% of the temporary migrant agricultural workers are employed, we're talking about over 25,000 workers. This puts these workers in a very vulnerable position where the employer, as already mentioned, has all the power over the employee. In Ontario and Alberta, agricultural workers continue to be excluded from the Labor Relations Act. This is something that usually we don't see the media nor politicians talking about, meaning these workers cannot join a union. This creates vulnerability and essentially denies the ability of workers to exercise fundamental labor rights. This is something that already mentioned, facilitates exploitation. This is why UFCW demands that unionization should be mandatory to protect all temporary foreign workers. This is something that the federal government can implement it tomorrow if they have the political will. Employees who are not protected by a union can be fired or disciplined at any time. And the employer doesn't need to have a good reason for taking action against them. When workers are unionized, they are covered with a collective agreement, and the Provincial Labor Relations Act protects them. A collective agreement is a binding document that the employer must comply with it. Under the Ontario Agricultural Employees Protection Act, for those who are not familiar with the issue, these workers have their own act. It's called the Ontario Agricultural Employees Protection Act. Under this act, workers can form an association, but not unions. It asserts that employers have no obligation to negotiate with them, effectively denying agricultural workers the right to collective bargaining. Under this act, agricultural workers can work every day, 24/7, for months or even years without days off. We have witnessed migrant farm workers working for 6 to 7 months with no time off, because there are pressure to sign waivers saying that I'm a migrant worker, I'm happy to work every day, so the employer has something to cover his against any liabilities. This is well documented in more than 140 open work permits for vulnerable workers that UFCW has submitted and has assisted these workers to obtain. This is a federal program, federal government program that was implemented to support those who are experiencing abuses. So basically, every time an open work permit is granted under this program, means the federal government acknowledges that these migrant agricultural workers have been experiencing abuses. Back to the Ontario Agricultural Employees Protection Act, because I think it's important to put in context. Workers are not entitled to overtime nor mandatory holidays. Under this act, farm workers can be terminated at any time without a just cause. And this act has what is called the Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs Appeal Tribunal. Since 2002, when this act was implemented, This tribunal has received only 4 complaints. 4 complaints, all of them filed by the UFCW. This is, you know, at the same period, the Labor Relations Act Board, the Labor Relations Board in Toronto has received thousands of complaints, to put in context. This shows that this act is not there to protect agricultural workers. So agricultural workers haven't used this tribunal since its implementation in 2002 because they know there is no point to go before this tribunal. And workers who complain under this act can be subject to retributions and have no protection and can, you know, easily terminated. Back to the migrant workers cases, we continue to encounter far too often cases like the one in 2018, where UFCW assisted a group of migrant workers who were victims of human trafficking. They were recruited from their farms in Southern Ontario. They were exploited for over a year before finding protection with our union. In 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, a second group of migrant workers also were victims of human trafficking, reached out to our union. They were working in an illegal cannabis operation. They were told they were working in a legal operation. And we had to also assist these workers. And we had implemented partnerships with other service providers. This year, to give you another example, workers from Alberta escaped from a farm where they were exploited and traveled all the way from Alberta to Leamington. Some of them pay up to $3,000. They contacted our union because their documentation, included passports, had been retained by the employer. So I personally contacted the RNCMP to get assistance in recuperating their passports. And about a month, if you want to follow up this story, the Toronto Star published a story about this particular case. These and other documented cases show that migrant agricultural workers do not have confidence in the current system and are either too afraid to come forward for assistance or unaware of how to come forward. Also, to put in context, in 2010, the International Labour Organization, ILO, questioned Canada and Ontario over their legislation regarding agricultural workers. National and multi-provincial labor codes specifically prohibit agricultural workers from organizing, especially in unions. So the ILO has determined that this violates the human rights to free association as well as Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Now I'm going to talk about the work that UFCW does to support migrant workers. During the COVID pandemic, we have assisted over 100 migrant workers to obtain SERV benefits. Now it's called sick benefits, as these workers were abandoned by their employers with no medical support, no groceries. These workers didn't have money to get groceries. And, you know, to give you an example, a bank house with 30 workers abandoned. So it was very, very problematic. We also assisted the families of 2 migrant workers who died of COVID in the Windsor-Essex County in 2020 with information about their entitlements and coordinating with the local authorities to expedite the repatriation of their bodies. We have also assisted migrant workers to obtain open work permits. We are processing at no cost and supporting these workers in their language. So in their own languages, they can obtain an open work permit. Is a temporary relief. And if they experiencing abusive experiences or conditions, they can leave a bad employer. The problem with this temporary relief is that it's only valid for 1 year and it can't be renovated. And the majority of these workers can find a new employer because they are holding open work permits as vulnerable workers, meaning possible employers immediately know that these workers had reported their former employers. so they are not hired. Basically, these workers are excluded from the labor market. We also coordinated with several health units across Ontario and Canada, as workers who tested positive to COVID were abandoned. So they called us and said, look, we need some support. So the first thing we do was making sure these workers get medical attention and food. Has the situation improved for migrant workers in Canada? Unfortunately, there are not significant changes. The provincial and federal government are talking about providing more information to migrant workers and fixing some laws that already exist. But at the end of the day, if you are not protected by a collective agreement, the employer can terminate a worker without having any reason. Even if the worker knows about their rights, it's very difficult to come forward. Many migrant workers who tried to refuse unsafe work were terminated because the employer told them the season is over, or because, you know, any other excuses. The bad employer won't say, I'm terminating a worker because they refuse to do unsafe work. So this is to give you in summary, you know, a very, very quick summary. I would like to get into detail, but I think the time is against to finish this presentation. So what can we do to advocate for migrant workers? We have an ongoing petition. I'll be sharing in the chat. And please also stay up to date on our social media, share our content to help with our advocacy work. And also in 2020, we produced a report. It's called The Status of Migrant Workers in Canada 2020 that I'll be sharing through the chat as well. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much. And again, for having me here, the opportunity to share the work we do at UFCW.
Thank you so much, Santiago. Does anyone have any questions at all for Santiago? We do have a couple of minutes before we need to move on. Any questions about migrant workers? Please. You can feel free to unmute if you'd like. Or put it in the chat.
I have a question. Sorry, I have a
Yes,
question. So the question is, if we, because I've had I wouldn't say the chance, but I've had a few migrant workers contact me. And so if we hear any situations where they would need some kind of legal help, would that be something that we can refer to UFCW?
Thank you, Wendy, for the question and the suggestion. Of course, we're happy to assist and support all migrant workers across Canada. So I'm sharing right now a toll-free line. So if you check out the chat, you will see the toll-free number. So feel free to share that number with your clients or any migrant workers that they're looking for some support and advice.
And where are you located? Sorry, like.
We are located in Toronto, but we are a national office. And
okay.
For instance, in Quebec, as workers, as agricultural workers are able to, they can join a union. They're included in the Labor Relations Act. So these workers will represent workers, temporary foreign workers in Quebec. They're unionized and protected by our union in Quebec, to give an example.
Okay. All right. Okay. No, that's good. Because like I said, I've had a couple of migrant workers contact me, and we do have something in Hamilton, but it's always good to know that there is some like an organization that's actually working directly with them. So thank you so much.
No, thank you, Wendy.
There is one more question in the chat, Santiago, and the question comes from Jessamine Peralta. Is there a possibility for our temporary workers from home, caregivers, support workers, farm workers, factory, etc., to join a union here in Ontario?
My understanding is that, yeah, they can actually join a union. The thing is that And in Ontario and probably across Canada, in order to unionize a workplace, you go by jurisdiction, by municipality, by address. So usually what we do is we organize a meat plan, a warehouse where you have number of workers. So to be honest, I really don't know how to proceed when it comes to individuals, because the way it works is that we organize collectively group of workers.
But I think the individual can call the toll-free number and gain more information. Would that be?
Of course, correct? Yes.
Okay.
And in terms of providing support services, referrals, yes, our toll-free, we have assisted, caregivers, workers in hospitality, in the fish industry, you name it.
Okay, and there's another question from Nina, she, her, to everyone. Do you have provide support who are not living in the Windsor area? So do you provide supports for workers who aren't living in the Windsor area?
Like I said before, we are a national union and we were able to provide support across Canada.
And another question from Vivian Sali, are there membership fees?
For non-unionized workers who are getting services through the Agricultural Workers Alliance is at no cost, so no charge at all. But when you join a union, once you have a collective agreement approved by the membership and has been, the union has obtained a certificate, the next day, the members, the workers, will begin paying union dues. Before that, members don't pay any union dues.
So I'm unmuting myself. I have a question again for Santiago. Can I ask now or should I wait till the end of the session?
If it's related to the question that you asked before, that's great. And then I see you, Megan, right after.
Okay, so it's related to that because the person is not working in the agriculture field right now. I know you touched most of them were in agriculture field, but he's a temporary worker. And I happened to, this morning session, they were talking about how some things have been done in person, cannot be done online. And it was during this COVID time, I had a problem with my water hose. I had to call a plumbing company. The plumbing company is unionized, or means they are known for a long time, I cannot name it. But the person who's working, who took my information, was a temporary worker, fresh graduate from, college, international student, but now he's an open work permit. And he's a PR, but he was hesitant to give me information, not only about his PR, but also to tell me why he doesn't get any break, doesn't he get lunch break, doesn't get coffee break. And he's working, sort of 8 hours, he's working 9 to 10 hours. And so it's under the same thing what you're telling, that the temporary workers or migrant workers are working longer hours and they're afraid to tell the employer's name. Or if I said I can talk to employer because he's allowed to give you breaks, he said, no, I'm okay. And then he hung the phone up. So what do you do? How can you advocate on behalf of those clients?
If the worker is unionized, the first thing to do is to contact to their union representative. If the worker is non-unionized, they can call to our toll-free and we can assist these workers accordingly.
Okay, so the worker has to call you.
Yes, because I would like to get more information.
Not the person who's working for them.
Sorry, I missed that part. Could you repeat it again?
I think they said the worker has to call you, not the person that's working for them.
Yeah, if the worker would like to reach out to us.
Not the employer. You're talking about the person who's supposed with the call to work, the employee. Okay, I don't think employer is going to reach out, but thank you for the information.
Sure, yeah. Feel free to give us a call.
Yeah, I don't think employers want to be disclosed. That's the thing. right?
Thank you so much, Nina. You
Thank
touch
you.
on a really important concern in this process. There's one more individual with a question, Megan Ye, and then we have to close it, unfortunately, and go on to the next presentation. But you can hang out for a little bit of time at the end of all these three presentations. Megan, please take it away.
Sorry, I so far do not have any questions. Maybe I accidentally unmute myself.
Okay, I apologize. I thought I saw the raised hand function. Thank you so much for saying that. And thank you, Santiago, for providing this, this wonderful presentation. And the system is complicated and unfortunately it's abusive. And so now we're going to move on to continue talking about workers' voices and the importance of centering them in advocacy. And we're going to do that through an Indigenous lens. So passing it on to Angela Fiddler, who is a fierce community advocate, a leader in her own right in her community. And we are so lucky that Angela is joining us from Treaty 6 territory, UFCW Local 401 member, who will share with us her perspective on Indigenous rights. But before she starts, we will play a short video by our UFCW Canada Indigenous Sub-Committee. Thank you.
I'm proud to take part in the UFCW Canada 2020 Lobby Day. I'm passionate about employment of Indigenous people on and off reserves. I'm always looking to help solve any barriers that affect our employment. Lobbying helps solve these issues.
One of the reasons why it's so important for us to lobby on a day like today is best summarized in one of my favorite quotes. If you aren't appalled, if you aren't outraged, you aren't paying attention. Everybody's heard at least one statistic or 100 statistics about how the founding people of our territories have been systematically put in unequal opportunities. So today we are acknowledging and addressing present wrongs, not just past wrongs, and lobbying to make a difference in our drinking water, in being able to shower everywhere we go, in bringing home our missing and murdered sisters, mothers, and aunties, and to stop putting just Band-Aid solutions on our foster care system and the overpresence of our Native brothers and sisters in it, as well as in many other aspects of our Indigenous people.
Today is important so we can make government aware of the 4 critical issues as we meet with federal political representatives.
Some of the issues that we're tackling and are going to overcome that are priorities in this meetings are access to safe drinking water, addressing calls for justice regarding missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, equity for First Nation children in Canada, and employment and labor shortages in First Nations community. I'm looking forward to helping solving these problems and bridging the gap. And I'm thankful to my subcommittee members and all those who work so hard to bring First Nations issues to the forefront. And I'm looking forward to moving the issues forward.
I'm honored to be able to do this with the great people in our subcommittee. I learn more and more each time that we get together. I'm also a little bit fascinated with the way some of or a lot of the MPs, or most of them anyway, the way they have the issues in hand, and that they can be great allies to us. And we just need to with determination and perseverance, hopefully we can get a lot of our issues settled one step at a time, day by day, and we shall keep on going.
I'm proud to be here and proud to represent the Indigenous people of our union and many of other unions and non-union as well. I think it's been going great. It's a great thing that we're doing. Have a great among good speakers here that are on 4 different issues: water, murdered and missing women, children's issues, employment issues. Yes, and the people we spoke to so far have been pretty on track. So hopefully we can get some issues resolved and have many more of these. So, and I just want to say thank you to my local, to the national for helping us out and all that they do, and to national for also allowing us to have our subcommittee as well. It's gratefully appreciated, and thank you very much. Miigwech.
Hi, Dansa. I'm Angela Fiddler. I'm from the Treaty 6 territory in Saskatchewan. I come from Waterhen Lake First Nation, which is in northern Saskatchewan. I thank you for joining us today. I wanted to share a little bit about why it's important that the Indigenous people have their voices heard within society and even within our own membership, UFCW, or anybody that wants to take part and listen. Being recognized in Canada took a long time. We still are not fully recognized. Our rights are still not fully recognized. I wanted to say thank you to our union, our national union, because in the beginning, I had mentioned and I talked about how we are the first laborers on this land. These are our lands. This is where we come from, where we were born, where we are one with creation. And he gave us, the Creator gave us these lands to labor, to be able to feed ourselves, our families. He gave us the animals, the water, the air. He's given us the sun. He's given us great things. We were the first laborers of this land. And then after that, when the newcomers started coming in from the different parts of the world, they were the second laborers of the land. It's very important that non-Indigenous people stand with us, stand beside us, because we are all equal. From wherever you come from, where your ancestors came from, they were all first laborers of their own lands. And so we are all equal, no matter where we are, in whosever land we are living in and benefiting from. I want to say thank you, because you standing beside us, you're going to be helping us with truth and reconciliation. We as Indigenous people have come a long ways. We are opening up to the truth, and we're letting the truth be known about colonization, about residential school, day schools, about the abuse that we've went through. And by telling these truths, we can all become one. We can all, you can hear our stories and you'll understand why things are the way they are right now. How when you go and you see, you think, or other people think, bums on the street, or, you know, all the different stereotyping that is out there about Indigenous people. By listening to our truths, by hearing the history of what we went through, you'll begin to understand, and you'll be able to help us, because we went through a lot of trauma, and it's going to take 7 generations in order to heal from that. Many times our voices are not heard, especially when you're working. When I first went to camp and I first started my job, I was so grateful to have a job. I was very quiet. I didn't want to create any ripples, or at first, because I didn't want to lose my job. But once I understood what being unionized was, I began to open up. I began to see how the Indigenous people were being treated at work. And a lot of the times our temporary foreign workers are treated the same way, where we weren't treated very well. When I started dealing with issues at camp, when I realized that we didn't have a voice, there was nobody there to go forth before us, I knew someone had to step up, and that person was me. I always, since I was young, remembered that there has to be justice, there has to be truth and honesty. There needs to be people who are humble. So I remember all these qualities from my grandparents, from my parents. My grandpa was a chief, my dad was a chief, and perhaps one of these days I'll be chief as well. So I you know, all these leadership skills came into effect for me. I began to go around talking to my people, the Indigenous people, and to see where the issues and the problems were. By then, I went to management and tried to deal with these issues, but they didn't understand. They were kind of blown away, like, what? And I went into my lodge manager's office one day and I said, I'm the chair of the Indigenous Committee. And he looked at me and he was like, what? Like, he didn't understand. But there had to be a voice. I had to go out there and say, we need this. This is what we need here in our workplace. We needed a place of prayer, because a camp job, there is nowhere to pray. Because a lot of our traditional people, they pray using sweetgrass, and we weren't allowed to light any candles or sweetgrass in our rooms. We were not to have any flames open in case it started a fire. And so my one coworker almost got fired because he smudges and he prays in his room, and they said it was unacceptable. So I told them, you need to be inclusive. You need to find somewhere where they can go and pray and use their sweetgrass. So they brought in a teepee, but a teepee was okay spring, summer, fall, but not in the winter. The gel in the stove was gelling up. I mean, the propane, and you know, it was so cold, 50 below out. Like, who wants to walk in the cold all the way over there just to pray? So I said, no, that's not good enough. So in order to make these changes at camp, in order for our voices to be heard, I needed to do more than just go into the office and speak. I had to become a shop steward to represent And then from there, I had to go into collective bargaining. So in the collective bargaining, when I was in negotiations, I negotiated the first ever letter of understanding between the Indigenous people and the company. And through there, we were able to participate and celebrate in our National Indigenous Day with pay. I was able to host the celebrations along with my coworkers. We decided how we were gonna celebrate that day and what to buy and everything. So we basically set that up for all the workers to enjoy, and management, and also from corporate. They came out to support and to take part in our Indigenous Day celebrations. We also had to, we did a lot of actually, bargaining for a lot of our rights, even though we are sovereign, we know what we do, but the non-Indigenous people didn't know what they did. So we went through a lot of hardships. We are where we are now. I think a lot of times that, being in the union, we have to be able to make sure we speak out or go to our representative to speak for us. And so this was kind of groundbreaking work because we didn't have really any Indigenous people within the union, even locally or nationally. And so we've come to found the Subcommittee for Indigenous Rights nationally. There's a lot of accomplishments that we did together as Indigenous people. A lot of accomplishments took me a long way. I've learned to speak without being embarrassed or shying away or even crying, because right in the beginning, I used to always cry because, I'm so passionate about Indigenous rights. So now I've become very used to speaking, and I take every opportunity I can to speak for us, for the people, for my people who are very shy, who aren't very vocal, who'd rather quit their job instead of dealing with the issues at hand. I've been presented the Matriarch Award 2018 from FSIN, which is the Federation of Sovereign Indian Nations in Saskatchewan, for the work I've done out at camp and within my union. That's one of my accomplishments from coming from the reserve, having no jobs, no skill set, and then just coming to work, to accepting a job out at camp, and then being able to accomplish a lot, to gain knowledge and understanding and wisdom using, talking with my coworkers and my elders and my grandpa and my grandma and my parents and my uncles. And so I've gained a lot of wisdom that way, and also not just them, but also through the union, through my president, through all my coworkers. And I began to take union courses in order to better myself and my skill set. I now sit on the Alberta Federation of Labor as alternates vice president for my UFCW, and also as an Indigenous representation there. I've helped open through my gaining skill set at camp and working and being able to persevere through all of that, through all of the issues at camp and Indigenous, enforcing Indigenous rights. I was able to gain a lot of skill sets without quitting my job, without leaving. I've been employed there since 2010. So one of my skill sets that I had developed helped me in opening up a new Dakota Dunes resort on a First Nation in Saskatchewan. I've also made my way from the dish pit to housekeeping coordinator, which is kind of the top of the ladder within my company at camp. Financially stable and raised my 6 children, and now I have a grandchild. So, you know, a lot of my accomplishments I was able to accomplish because I've had the union help me, help my Indigenous people. They play a big part in, you know, helping us all. And so I kind of just wanted to be able to share that with you, because a lot of our voices aren't heard, but through the union, they can be. And they do help us. The union always helps us and always makes sure to back us up. And yes, if you have any questions, you can ask me. And thank you for listening.
Angela, thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
No, I'm sorry. Okay. If you look on the chat, you'll see that your beautiful presentation has been met with some accolades and congratulations. And with that, pass it on to Eric. Miigwech, Angela. Miigwech. Thank you.
Bonjour. Bonjour. Que BJ wawa tendes nikas zai zay ma konto tem. Kaga gwat ke jion. Mani do be. We can act many sing dongji. Hello, my spirit name comes with the Northern Lights, and I belong to the Brown Bear Clan of the Ojibwe people of Ebb and Flow First Nation, Manitoba, Turtle Island. My English name, or my cowboy name, is Eric Flett. I was healthcare aide at St. Boniface Hospital for 29 years, and I retired a couple of years ago. But during that time, I was a shop steward, and there was a time when I was at work where I was having issues with management because of them not hearing me as an Indigenous person, not just as a union member, but as an Indigenous person. And in our collective agreement at the time, I went to do a traditional ceremony called Sundance. I was about, I don't know, 28 years ago, maybe. And we had nothing in our collective bargaining agreement for time off for members for spiritual ceremonies. And this is a ceremony that lasts for 4 days. It's the biggest ceremony we do. And at the time, I asked for help, and it made me understand a lot about where we were in society as Indigenous people. There was a point where we weren't even considered human beings, not until like 1960. I want to laugh when people say, now I got to carry around a vax card. Because as an Indigenous person, as Angela knows, we have to show a card that we are Indigenous and that we belong to a reservation. Because there were one time, we needed permission to leave our reserve on our own home territory. We had to get written permission to leave our reserve. And we've come a long way since then, but the time I speak of at work, there was nothing in our collective bargaining agreement that would help me to be able to get days off during the highest times, prime vacation period. So I went to my union, and I actually prayed about this. So my culture, my spirituality is very important for me. because it guides everything that I do on this road. Miscu Mikana, we say in my language in Ojibwe, it's the red road. This is a good life. The good life that Gijamani do, the love and God has given us. And we all have the right to walk on this road in a good way. And I prayed about this, and then I talked with my partner about it, and I said, you know, I got to do something. How am I going to get the union to recognize how important this is for me as an Anishinaabe person, and that they need to support it? So what we came up with is, I got to get my butt in the union. I need to get in there. The best way for me to say something is to get in there and be a voice in there. And it's like, you know, before that, I would, like my sister said, Angela, I wasn't the greatest at speaking, especially for myself. Hey, I can advocate for others, but when it comes to myself, it's like, it's a little harder. But the getting involved in the union really helped me do that, become a better speaker, a better advocate. But it always comes back to me is my culture and my spirituality. Because when I prayed about that and I asked for help and guidance, like how can I be heard? I had to join the union. That I had to get myself inside that are local, not just as a member, but doing something productive. Then I got a call from our president, and she said, Eric, I want to take you for lunch. And it's like, cool. Food is huge, right? As our sister said, our ancestors worked this land and provided for our families, but food is big. Food is big. So I got a meal, but when we got to that meeting, that lunch date, she asked me, Eric, I wanted to ask you something. And I said, okay, you want me to be part of the union? And she says, how did you know? And it's like, I have helpers, right? I have my traditional helpers that help me. But what I didn't know, I thought I was going to be a shop steward, but she asked me to run for vice president of our local, which was huge for me. And I said, sure, I'll run. And I won. I don't know if it was by a landslide, but I won. And that was a big thing for me, because now I'm inside and I got a voice, right? And right away, as soon as I got on, they asked me to sit in the HRED committee, which I was honored to sit in with Emmanuel. And then we created the Indigenous Sub-Committee, which was huge. So we have a lot of Indigenous people in our union nationally, but the culture for me, it's not just about Indigenous people. Like these colors here, red, white, yellow and black. These are the 4 colors in our medicine wheel teachings. And one of the teachings is it's the 4 races of man: the white man, the yellow man, the black man, and the red man. And then we all belong in that medicine wheel. So our spirituality as an Anishinaabe person, as an Ojibwe person, it's not just for me, it's for all races of man. We all belong in that circle. And so it's important, like spirituality for me. Everything always comes back to spirituality. And that time when I got in the union, it was very important to me and it was huge. But we grew from there. And that's what I always say I love about my union, is my union loves to help people who need help. And it's not just union members, it's non-members. And it's not just, like from my perspective, Indigenous people, it's for all people. What's big right now is the 94 calls to action. And one of those calls to action is, it has to do with our children who are being found. And that number, when it started, was at 215. These are our ancestors that we lost. And it's important to keep their memory alive. Our ancestors, like all the hard work that our ancestors have done. And UFCW is just right on board with it. And it's a part of what we're doing. It's an everyday part of our union. And it's not just because of Indigenous people, not just trying to help Indigenous people. I know there's a lot of my people who don't practice their own culture. right? Their own spirituality, because a lot of that was taken away with colonialism, residential schools, 60s scoop, child and family services, all of that. A lot of it was taken away, and a lot of my own people don't know their own culture. And the union is big on that, which I appreciate, right? I'm sure there's so many in our union membership that feel the same way. And that's what we've been trying to do, is help one another. And it's not just because we want to push everything forward for Indigenous people. It's for everybody. Like I said, those 4 colors, we're all brothers and sisters in our teachings. We're all brothers and sisters. No one's better, no one's worse than the other. And you know what, like Black Lives Matter, that was huge, right? But people said, well, why just Black lives? Why not all lives? And it's like, you know what, all lives matter. And it's a touchy subject to go around, but in the spotlight at that time, Black lives mattered, right? And why not support them in that? That's just my point of view, because it's important in my eyes that we all work together as one to help each other in all our struggles, right? Everybody's struggle is important, right? And it needs to be shown, because a lot of people have no idea what's going on in society. Either they're blind to it or they want to be blind to it. And that's a part of what I love about the union, is we're always trying to open other people's eyes. And that Black Lives Matter was huge. Our missing and murdered was huge when it came out. The 215 when it came out was huge. But a lot of this, especially the Truth and Reconciliation 94 calls to action, there's so much that needs to be done in those calls to action. But it's hard when we run into these roadblocks. Like one call to action, the Pope giving an apology, which should have been done a long time ago in my eyes. But our union is we're working collectively to try and push that to the forefront and lobby the government and the church that they need to apologize to our people. Thank you, Emma. I know I'm number 1, but thank you. I saw the number 1. I don't know if Angela saw it earlier, but you know what? There's so much I'd love to say. I could talk till tomorrow, and Emma and Angela know this, but there's so much teachings in my culture that one thing that's huge is the 7 teachings. And in those 7 teachings, they're everyday teachings, life skills: love, respect, wisdom, courage, truth, honesty, humility. Those 7 teachings, it's supposed to help us to walk in a good way. And the way I understand it in our creation stories, like we were created and we were supposed to be put on Mother Earth to walk in kindness towards one another. And like Angela was talking earlier about sweetgrass, smudging with the sweetgrass, that sweetgrass. There's so many teachings in that sweetgrass, the 7 generations, the 7 teachings. We use 7 blades of sweetgrass to represent the past 7 generations, the 7 teachings, and then the next 7 generations coming. And so that's 21 braids of sweetgrass that we braid together in that sweetgrass. And that represents the hair of Mother Earth. And we're supposed to use that in kindness. And so that kindness represents that braid. And the teachings, like I could go on and on, but there's so many teachings in there. But I wish we could do this again for a longer time, because there's so many teachings in there that should help not just Indigenous people, everybody, those 4 races, the 4 colors of man. We're all supposed to work together in a good way, in kindness, and have respect for one another. One of those teachings, respect. And respect is huge. And that's the best way we can move forward as a people, not just as a union or as a labor movement, as an organization, or just as Indigenous people. We need to move together in a good way, move forward as human beings, which we all are. And I would love to say more, but actually I would like to hear a couple of questions. So before I close this off, the way I always speak is I always speak in my language, and I say my name and my clan and where I'm from. That's me choosing to identify, how I identify, right? I get to choose how I identify, not society, right? People can be so judgmental, but this is how I identify. He, him, yeah, he, him. That's how I identify. But also in my language, my spirit name always comes first, because that's how it would have been back in the day. From day one, time immemorial, that's how our people knew each other. We spoke in our own language and our spirit names. That's what came first. But when we always close off something, when we talk traditional, we always end it with miigwech, ibizendawiak, awe nungum, akene, and then away maganiduk. Oh, and in my language, that means thank you to all of you for coming today, but for listening to what I had to say. All my relations in that creation story, that's how I was taught. We have to acknowledge all our relations, not just the 4 races, man, everything, because we are all related. We were all created from Mother Earth. All the human beings, the animals, the trees, the plants, all of it. That's why every time I finish speaking, I would say, thank you, all my relations.
Miigwech so much. Thank you so much, Eric. And Angela and Eric, both of you have provided such wonderful insight. And really, when you talk about truth to power and culture, you really take us down to, like, at least you ground me in a way that I find nothing else grounds me, as when we talk about Indigenous rights and we talk about it through spirituality and healing and prayer. If anyone wants to make a comment or ask one question, we do have time for one, and then we have to move on to our last presentation. So please make yourself known. Otherwise, Eric, I would encourage you to look in the chat where folks have posted some beautiful comments, as well as Angela as well.
Okay, any questions? I'll look in the chat.
Okay. So seeing no hands up, no questions, I want to say, Miigwech, thank you so much, both of you, for informing this workshop. And we're going to move on to our last segment, which is profiling the historic UFCW LGBTQ plus study of UFCW members across the US and Canada. And to do that, we're going to play a very short video, like 1 minute long, and then pass it over to Jackie. Here we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma, for the short video and the beginning of what a journey for myself has been. My name is Jackie Graticola. My pronouns are she and her. I come from Venezuela, Latin America. I moved to Canada 30 years ago. My decision was a self-imposed exile. And when I said that, it has to do with the times and the shame at what point to move out of my country, my culture, my family, my friends, my network, my work, and to start all over in a foreign country, even though I have my language and some study, was not enough. It was a very difficult decision. I discussed that with my grandmother, Maita. And as an elder, I did listen to her, and she said one thing, and it always stuck in my head. Canada will be your place to change and the place to be recognized and to able to change the culture as a whole. So it took time for me to navigate the work system in Canada. My first experience was horrible. I got laid off by own self-signature when I was trying to go back to school and work part-time. I was left without a job. I survived. I persist, I resist, I continue. But I made a point that my next job will be in a place that where I could belong and where I have some level of protection in any way. So unions become something new for me. And the journey started as when my first rep recognized me and says, I'm from someplace else. And I have questions to know what my collective agreement means. And that little journey has taken me all this year, 25 years almost to the date, where my involvement as a steward started on the floor, as a rank and file, and the need to be visible. When I become visible, I become my true self, and I start shining and be able to carry that shine to my fellow workers as well, who were not able to speak out. So I come the first front for them. And that made my life mission to help and empower and educate everybody along, to shoulder, all communities, because at the end of the day, we all together. And only when we start being together, we make the changes, we support one another. All the causes that we have, even in the union movement, has a humanity base to change, to empower us, to elevate, to eliminate barriers and divisiveness, and to make us a place to be equal. So on that, as I progress with the local, I become a union rep. It's been the last 6 years. And with that, we start doing little bits of changing to have pride committee. We have a very informal pride committee, and we developed that pride committee to have a visibility in the workplace and on the street. When we start celebrating, we were a handful at the time, and now we have hundreds when we actually participate. And when the first couple prides that I did in Ottawa, I could hear in the background on the sidelines, that is my union. That is UFCW. I work with them. And that makes such an impact personally, because the work is being seen and it's so important. So with that little bit of background to say where I come from and what my direction is, we're still working. And we're still working because the changes needs to be still recognized. We evolve, society is evolving, and it's always been an organism that evolves, is alive. And so we need to take that. We create our reach in 2013 and the first conventional that we have. So it's involved, it has grown to now be able to even have a cooperation with a university in California, Los Angeles, and create a study that we create, or they create in collaboration, and have our membership participate in their surveys, because we needed to know where else we can do and where we can improve and what are the challenges that we are having right now. So one of the main challenges are recognition for transgender workers, how we can protect them on the floor, in the factories, and the retail floor, supermarkets, everywhere, even including, for sure, the agricultural groups. So we have, it's a woven a cloth that we belong. So With that research set, when we evaluate 1,004 members, and a lot of them were 33% was responded in Canada. So we're going to focus a little bit in Canada as well as in the States. And it came 17% of those were retails workers, 9% came from the packing and processing workers across Canada. 33 were Canada. That includes interviews, that 99% identifies as intersex, transsex, non-binary, and surprisingly enough, and not surprised, 83% of the participant has a family or members or friends who are LGBTQ to us. So we are all somehow connected. And with that connection, then we can demonstrate the needs of each group and how we can help and support by having gender neutral bathrooms, by having a workplace, by having name tags that refers to the individual identity and how they present themselves, even through the journey from going from one to another transgender journey, and how we can support. So all that is in combined with that, how we can do that. The main thing that we can do as a union, as a rep, is the language what we create in the collective agreements, where we reflect the protection of all minorities and everybody as large. So we have to have this anti-discrimination language in the agreement, how we can have workers be protected because of the union contract, and how they can actually reach out to reps to say, I'm being discriminated, or I'm being bullied, or I'm being not given my name tag that are correct. So every single little things that may seem small for somebody is huge for another person, because that's the whole individual as a whole. So one of the things that we need to do, and is creating a safe work environment. We need to be visible. We need to understand and support pronouns. We need to be inclusive in communications, negotiation, gender affirmative language, and benefits, because benefits is crucial for them to be able to present this the way they would like to be presented. Create an LGBT chapters in the workplace or different locations within the unions and different locals that represent in their own environment. Call out discrimination. When you see something, say something, stand up. This is no time to be a bystanders anymore. We need to act. And the only way to do that is when we teach, educate, and we do the walk that we talk, and be there, solid, shoulder to shoulder, and educate. When my local asked me how I can educate my own reps and within the local, I was completely enlightened to do that, because they would come to me and say, I don't know how to address or talk to somebody because I don't know. I don't want to be offensive of any way. So I come in and give them that opportunity and like them to be able to have the language and the skills to do so. So that is every little grain that we give will make the changes in our life, in our locals, our union, and how we as a society will grow. Sometimes some of the other items that we can talk about the studies was what the needs that the group will say. We need to be represented, we need to have protection, we need to have the language, we need to have resources and educate within the workplace, the locals unions, the society. So the circle that starts from very tiny to embrace as a globe. So we have the ability not just locally small, but the wave and the repercussions worldwide will be sound, and we will be here and will be listened to, and things will change all together. So I would like to have any questions. Is everybody wants to make any suggestions or anything that you would like to talk about?
Thank you so much, Jackie. That was wonderful. If you'd like to know more about the report, I'll try and stick it in the chat right now, or a link to the UFCW Outreach website where you can get more information on the report. Does anyone have any questions that you'd like to unmute for? No? No comments? Do any of the speakers have any final comment before we close off? Then I want to take this opportunity to thank you so much for joining the Centering Worker Voices. We hope sincerely us all together as co-workers and colleagues doing this work. And before I close, there's Eric. Yes, Eric.
Sorry, Emma. Yeah, I just saw somebody chat. What year was that study done? I believe it said.
Thank you so much, Eric. It was a 2-year labor of love with the UCLA Labor Center. A few of us were part of a research group with academia. The UCLA Labor Center leads really fantastic progressive work, and UFCW Outreach was able to collaborate with this wonderful set of researchers in order to do a really, really credible, like a really well thought out research study of these 1,004 UFCW members binationally. You can definitely read more about it and even watch a webinar of what it entailed at the ufcwoutreach.org website, www.ufcwoutreach.org. And you can find out definitely more about UFCW Canada's work and our commitment to reconciliation by going to ufcw.ca or ufcw.ca/reconciliation to find out more about Indigenous rights, or ufcw.ca/pride to find out a little bit more about LGBTQ work.
Eric,
that's
to
it.
answer your question, the survey and the studies was completed in October 2020. So it's very recent, it's very current. So we have items that are, for instance, language that people were offensive to, jokes and stuff like that, that gives a lot of percentage and being breakout in different scenarios.
Thank you so much, everyone. This concludes our workshop.
Thank you.
English.
Okay.
Thanks.
Hi, Angela. Angela?
Hi there.
Hi. I'm not an Indigenous person.
Lost her.
Yeah. Thank you, Eric. You're so full of wisdom. And I'm not even sure how long I talked because I didn't even see M at all in my screen. It was showing some other person.
Oh, I see.
Oh, you stole about four or 5 minutes from me.
Sorry. I was trying to
I have to say, both of your presentation really moved me. And it gave me a little bit change of my own script as well. So that's what I say. It's all organic, and that's what I like about it, because it comes from the heart. It comes from a good place.
Yes.
So sorry, Eric.
I'm
sorry for cutting you off. That's why I said someone needs to text, because the text would come through, you know, and just kind of.
Well, I thought you saw me. I was going like this. I was like.
I couldn't see anything. All I could see was that the first presenter.
Mm.
Well, I think that was really wonderful. And I see that we still have a number of folks still with us. And yeah, so if anybody wants to unmute or say anything before you go, we are still here.
Is there any other questions in the chat?
I'm double checking. I don't think so. Oh, there we are. Now we're back. Are we back to, okay. So I really wondered whether I got it wrong and we were supposed to go until 3:30 or like a half an hour more, but it seems to me like we got it right. So thank you so much, all of you, for giving up your day to this.
Oh yeah, it was great.
Thank you, Emma, for your support as well.
Yeah, thank you everyone, and especially Emma. Thank you so much. This panel was powerful. Really enjoy it. Hopefully we have more of these panels, and thank you again, everyone. You did an amazing job.
And yeah, that's right. You know what? Before we got cut off there at the beginning, Santiago, I would like to discuss it further in our committees, actually, about the Indigenous people. In my friend in Brandon, who's teaching new immigrants about traditional people here from where they're coming from. Like that would be great to something to push forward.
Well, Eric, you are our resident elder. So if you would like to connect with Santiago, if you don't mind, Santiago, I can share your phone number or vice versa, and you can maybe have a conversation if that works for you.
Yep. Yeah, totally. No, I would love to. And thank you again. I think that the initiative would be amazing to replicate something here. And, you know, of course, I will keep you posted, Emmanuel. And thank you again.
Yep.
One last picture. 1, 2, 3. The smile of being finished and your beautiful eagle feather. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Thank you, OCASI.
Everybody.
Enjoy your weekend. Stay safe.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pro Show.
You love you guys.
Love you.
Love you. Love you.